Hello, everyone, and welcome to an exclusive clip here on the Echelon Cycling Podcast. Of course, we've had our episode 16 out that came out yesterday. But yeah, we had, unfortunately, that message of Remco Evenepoel having COVID and out of the Giro. So that whole episode was a bit wonky at times. But I'm joined, of course, by Audio creator Patrick, and of course, also our very own from the Cycling Dane and Mr. Critical himself, Ewan Wilson. So what we're going to speculate about today, Remco Evenepoel is out of the Giro d'Italia, as we know. But the Tour de France is, of course, the big question now. Is he going to be going there? We'll talk about the route, the possible team he can get, and also how he potentially could do against some of the rivals. So, I mean, who wants to kick it off? Like, absolutely terrible situation with the COVID and for Soudal Quickstep and the race.
It seemed almost there was something off. I think the injuries were sort of the scapegoat which people were going for. I guess that COVID wasn't really on the cards, but whether he just got a positive test that day, or whether like the tests weren't coming up negative the previous days, I don't know. That's just a whole can of worms. But yeah, you like you say, Evenepoel's out of a race, full stop. And how does that change the race? And there'll be Roglic and Ineos and et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, can Evenepoel, what is his goals going to be? Will he go to the Tour? I think that's a lot of speculation around that. Mid-May now, the Tour starts, well, pretty much first day of July. Is that enough time to kind of come around and do a kind of good result there? I'm not really too sure. The course only has one time trial, and it's not really a Remco sort of TT where he would put time into a Vingegaard and a Pogačar. It's not just like pan flat like the ones we just had at the Giro. I feel like the time differences would be smaller because there's some climbs in there. So I'm not sure if the course suits Remco as much as it did at the Giro. And you have to contend with the fact that the team will be sending, well, Soudal being the team, they'll be sending a sprinter more than likely to the Tour, because Jakobsen or Amelia or whoever they decide to go with. So the team won't be fully around Remco. So I don't think it's an ideal situation for Remco to go to the Tour. To be honest, I could see maybe a Vuelta or something else. I'm not fully convinced on the Tour angle, but I'm not sure if that's just me being pessimistic.
I also agree. I don't really believe in this Remco going to the Tour narrative. We've seen it before where riders have pulled out of the Giro and then they end up focusing for the Tour de France. We see it more often with the Tour de France and people crashing out and then focusing on the Vuelta. That's the more common lens. Going from the Giro to the Tour, it will be hard. Remco's had his whole season prepared for this point. He was at tip-top fitness before he got COVID. We don't know when he got it, but it seems like it was a couple days ago when he was looking tired. He said he felt ill, in fact, in the interview after stage 9. So his whole season's been fixed around this. Then to have sort of the 2 months that were going to be June and July of sort of rest before the World Championships, that would then have to be sort of competitive and angling up for the Tour de France. It would be quite difficult for him to really bounce around his whole calendar for this year. And yes, Remco is a phenomenal rider. He's a sort of stratospheric talent. Is he able to do this? We haven't quite seen a rider be able to sort of do this focus and win a Tour de France just after crashing out the Giro d'Italia before. Like, it would be quite unheard of, especially that we have Vingegaard, we have Pogačar, those two guys specifically targeting the Tour de France. They have all year. Yes, Pogačar's got a broken wrist at the moment, but he will be targeting the Tour de France and he will be there, as will Vingegaard, on tip-top form, knowing all season long that they've been targeting that race in July. For Evenepoel now to turn around a season and to compete with them, I think it will be tricky.
As you both said, maybe winning the Tour de France is probably out of the realms of possibility with the likes of Jonas Vingegaard and Tadej Pogačar. Both of them very good time trial lists as well in their own right. Yeah, whether or not he's going to go to the Tour, I think is, I mean, he's one of the biggest names in Belgium. He's the world champion. He's not guaranteed to be a world champion again in his career. Obviously, as a world champion, you want to be on the biggest stage.
He's not guaranteed to be the world champion by the time the Vuelta a España comes around as well. The Glasgow World Championships happen.
So why wouldn't he go to the Tour? Maybe he won't win it, but I mean, you both mentioned kind of the team for the Tour de France. We don't have the team as of yet, and most of the world champions that we know in recent times have all gone to the Tour as well to show off that jersey. But Soudal Quickstep currently on this predicted team: Remco Evenepoel, Mario van Sevenant, Michael Mørkøv, Florian Seneschal, Andrea Bajoli, Yves Lampard, Julien Alaphilippe, Fabio Jakobsen, that team that we kind of thought is sprints and stages. So there isn't the mountain Remco Evenepoel train with Jan Hurt, etc., etc. Ian van der Wielde on that front, is he just going to turn up with like hey, look, it's Remco, and then try and hang on in the mountains?
It'll be very Alaphilippe 2019-esque, actually, if that were the case, because Alaphilippe kind of turned up and just started doing the GC job out of nowhere. But I'm just not sure about it with Remco. I mean, it does kind of work because all the work will likely be done by Jumbo and UAE, so it's not really on Soudal Quickstep to set the pace, perhaps. Like, he could just kind of sit on the other two and just see what he can do. But part of me also thinks, will he even be able to do a good job at World Championships? The route's been recently revealed, and it's not really a course which massively suits Remco. There's not, I mean, you could say that maybe Wollongong didn't like suit him loads, but it seems more of like a definite puncher sort of circuit going around Glasgow. There's only one real kind of major climb, if you can even call it that, but it's not even that steep. So I don't really know what to. What was it? Is it the Crow Road or something? It's like a few K at 5% or something.
There's Montrose Street. I know the course pretty well. It goes through the University of Strathclyde. I was there for the European Championships back in 2018. I was there in January, actually, when I was up in Glasgow. It's about 13 or so percent right through the city centre, a couple hundred meters. That's probably the steepest kicker in the race. It's a really interesting climb. Straight road, so you come into it from a left-hand corner, then you exit it from a right-hand. That will be quite decisive. In 2018 at the European Championships, that's where we saw Van der Poel, Van Aert, and so forth make their big difference. So, yeah, I would agree it doesn't really suit Remco on paper, the Glasgow circuit.
Would he be better skipping the Tour and just, if he was to go for World Championships, just fully just go back up to Teed, miss the Tour, and just go and hit World Champs full gas? Would that make more sense than going to the Tour where we don't really know how he's going to recover from this COVID? He could be kind of not off a bike, but not really training too great over the next 2 weeks or so, maybe recovering from this, just being sure that, he's not suffering from long COVID. His preparation towards the Tour would be pretty average at best, especially in comparison to a Vingegaard and a Pogačar, and with a team that's not really tailored to Remco in the hills. I just don't think it fits. Like, yeah, he could get parachuted in, but I don't think that it would be the best thing. I reckon it would honestly be better for him to go for the Vuelta, especially if we've got such this massive lead-out train going for Soudal. I just think that they're more focused around stage wins in that sense rather than GC, and maybe Remco will go to the Tour next year.
He's not going to be world champion. And I think like having the world champion, the Belgian world champion, is such a huge marketing publicity.
That's very true.
Yeah, and I mean, wouldn't you like look at it from your side? If you're world champion, would you not want to go to the biggest race in the world and show off, and your stock goes up, and maybe you take a stage here, and maybe you get top 5, maybe you get top 3. I mean, that top 3, we spoke about that. Who's the third place in the Tour this year?
We did say this kind of like Alaphilippe last year was the world champion, and he didn't get taken over. There was the Liège crash, but people were saying, oh, Alaphilippe could go because he's world champion, and that's got like the publicity around it. But could he finish in third? Yes, but yeah, it's tricky. It's kind of a balance of what's better. Is it going to be finishing third at the Tour, or is it going to be going for a good crack at the Vuelta and trying to win that again? It's kind of that balance. I think people sort of think that the Tour is weighted more. It's just the way that it is. I don't know, but Remco's going to have a lot of tours in the future. But like you say, is he going to be world champion again? I don't know. It's a tricky one to try and balance up. It'll just fall in Lefebvre's lap to try and decide. I'm not really too sure because he seems very keen on Remco. And, is he going to want to rush him back into something too early? I mean, he did kind of rush back into the Giro after the Lombardia crash a bit too soon. Is going to the Tour after a little bit of COVID too far-fetched to think that they might do that again? Probably not too far-fetched to think that, actually.
Lefebvre likes Remco, but he also likes a sprint win at the Tour de France. Quickstep have been to the Tour de France, let me think. The last time they left the Tour de France without a stage win, correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section, would be 2012. In 2013, they got wins with Cavendish. 2014, they won a stage with Trentin in the sprint. 2015 with Cavendish, 16 with Kittel, 17 with Kittel, 18 with Gaviria, 19 with Viviani, 20 Bennett, 21 Cavendish, 22 Jakobsen, and 23 probably with Jakobsen or Merlier again. So There is definitely a trend of Lefebvre and Soudal picking, Quickstep sending a competent sprinter to the Tour de France with a competent sprinting team to guarantee a sprint stage win, because that's probably easier to lock down than getting the overall GC title. We haven't seen a real sort of solo rider win the Tour de France in my lifetime. Maybe Pogacar 2020, but he still had teammates there to some extent. It would be very hard to see Remco win this race. Would he go to the Tour de France regardless without the sort of desire to win the race? Potentially. He was willing enough to go to the Giro this year. He signed up for the Giro and knowing that he would probably miss the Tour de France a couple months back. Those circumstances have changed given that he will not be completing the Giro. But is it content to miss out the Tour de France knowing that he had a good 10 days in the Giro and he can leave it at that? That's up to him and Lefebvre to decide, but it would be very hard to see Remco fit into that Tour de France squad. If they want to be rigid in their structure of getting that easy sprint win and also probably getting a breakaway win or breakaway top three somewhere along the board with Bajoli or Alaphilippe or so forth, then I think it's hard for Remco to really find his place in that Tour de France squad.
We have seen Remco be a part of lead-out trains for Quickstep, though, especially in like a lot of the early season stuff at like Valenciana or Algarve in years gone by.
Even San Juan this year for Jakobsen himself.
He's not alien to being a part of a lead-out train. It's not like he's going to be just like a Van Zevenaar, who's just kind of he's a bit of an odd one out. He could actually get involved, and could he get in a breakaway and win a stage in the World Championship bands? Yeah, he probably could. So by that account, would Quickstep be quite happy to send him there? I feel like they almost might be. I don't know. I feel like I'm changing my opinion and thinking that almost he could go, because he could be a part of a lead-out train and he could go in breakaways. And, we've seen Alaphilippe do that in the past. I think that Remco could fall into that role, but it's just a matter of, I don't know, almost like the rider, not like safety, but the rider health. Like, are they going to be okay with sending Remco there after he's had COVID? Are they going to be worried about the long-term kind of repercussions of bringing somebody back into the competitiveness after COVID and the respiratory kind of longevity and the damage that comes with that? Like, I don't know. I think it's going to be a big tussle up between like the team doctors and what Lefebvre wants and what Remco wants. It's just going to be a bit of a juggling act.
I feel like if he goes to the Tour de France, that completely jeopardizes a very legitimate chance of winning the Vuelta. He could really, really win the Vuelta later this year. It makes a lot of sense. He won it last year. It's probably going to be a weaker field than the Tour de France. Tour de France, everyone's going to be on their tip-top form. And for Evenepoel now to sort of jig around that season, it's going to be difficult for him to be on that form. We don't even know if he can beat Pogacar. Don't necessarily think it's productive for him to go to the Tour de France. I completely understand Scott's argument about the publicity angle of it. It's a shame the World Championship aren't in September this year, because then he'll have the rainbow jersey in the Vuelta and he'd still win a Grand Tour as world champion. But it makes a lot of sense for him to go to sort of get that talk and so forth. And it'll be a huge headline for Soudal to have Remco there. A bit like sort of Cavendish back in 2021. That was a huge headline. Yes, he managed to do really, really well in that Tour de France, but initially coming into that race, everyone was talking about the Cavendish story. If Remco were to come into this Tour de France last minute, it would be a huge story for the team, stir up so much media attention. A Soudal above just getting headlines nowadays. Having Jakobsen or Malir getting a stage or two along the way, that's probably better than having a couple headlines and news. Or
yeah, but think of Remco as well. He wants to be at the biggest race. Biggest riders, the world champion.
Yeah, but he signed up to the Giro. He didn't think he was going to do
Yeah, but that was probably a big bag of money that also swayed his decision there. Well, is this where I say allegedly? Don't come after us, Giro. But anyway, we're going to finish it up with our prediction. Okay, the prediction is going to be a complex one. It's going to be, first, is he going to go to the Tour? Yes or no? If you say no, you make it boring. If you say yes, you have to say where in GC and if he's going to win any stage wins. So we'll let Ewan go first, because I think you're the most cynical here about this.
Well, I just think that the thing is, I really want him to achieve his full potential. That's what I'm thinking. Yes, it would be a fantastic spectacle for him to go to the Tour de France in the rainbow jersey. We finally have that Pogacar versus Evenepoel battle. Well, we're getting onto that, but we'd finally get that Pogacar.
A very long no.
that we so want. But I don't think it's the right decision. I'm going to say no, he won't go.
Ooh.
I think he needs to focus on getting the rainbow bands in the time trial around Sterling in August, maybe even targeting the World Championship road race as well, if he can, and that focus on the Vuelta. That was on the cards for a long time. I feel like Remco is definitely down for a Vuelta top 3. I'm not necessarily convinced he's up there for a Tour de France top 3 if he sort of jumps into the Tour de France lineup last minute, especially alongside a mountain squad of Muller and Jakobsen. Are they going to be charging up the climbs in the Alps?
Yeah, sure. We saw Jakobsen last year. He was fine in the mountains.
Yeah.
I specifically remember him being fine.
I'm going to say he's not going to go, and he'll focus on those later objectives, and he will win the World Championship bands in Sterling in the time trial.
Boomer.
Look forward to that because I'll be there in Glasgow to watch that happen. For the sake of content, I'll provide the other voice for the other side of the argument. For the sake of content,
someone voice of reason.
I think that Remco, I think Lefevre, the red mist is going to descend, and he's just going to see Remco headlines all over the shop. I think he's going to think Remco can do the lead outs. We'll send him in a break or two. I'm going to even be so ballsy to say that I think Remco will go, and I think he will win stage 12 specifically.
But what about overall? Nowhere.
No, not overall. I think he'll go. I think he'll be lead out, train, and he'll get a stage win. There you go.
I'm going to say
crazy.
No stage wins, but finishes third on the podium.
So we've got every angle. So one of us will be correct, unless he goes, does nothing and wins nothing, in which case we are all wrong.
Gets COVID in the first week.
Imagine.
But anyways, that's it for our very exclusive clip here on the Echelon Cycling Podcast. Make sure to check out our episode 16 as well. Check out the Cycling Dane, check out Audu Cycling, check out all the different Instagrams, Patrick Blake, Ewan Wilson, the Cycling Dane, Audu Cycling, all of that on Twitter as well. So with that, thank you very much for watching, and we will see you in episode 17.